The Ming Dynasty, which ruled China from 1368 to 1644, was a period of great cultural and technological achievements. However, it was also marked by some shocking events that shaped its history. From political intrigue to massive rebellions and devastating plagues, the Ming Dynasty was a time of both triumph and tragedy. In this era, significant cultural, social, and economic developments were made, but the dynasty also witnessed some of the most gruesome and violent episodes in Chinese history. In this context, it is important to explore some of the most shocking things that happened during the Ming Dynasty to gain a deeper understanding of this complex and fascinating period. The dynasty's founder grew up in poverty. Born Zhu Yuanchang in 1328 and orphaned at age 16. The man who had found the Ming Dynasty survived by begging before becoming a novice at a Buddhist monastery. When his monastery was burned down a few years later during a conflict between Yuan Dynasty soldiers and rebels from a Buddhist sect known as the Red Turbans, Zhu joined the rebels, quickly rising through the ranks and even marrying the daughter of one of his commanders. By the time his men overthrew the Yuan Dynasty capital of Nanjing, the 40-year-old Zhu had distanced himself from the rebels' more esoteric teachings, although the name he gave his dynasty, Ming, means bright, in a possible reference to the god of light revered by his former comrades. The dynasty's Beijing capital complex was actually called the Purple Forbidden City. In the early 15th century, the Hongwu Emperor's son, the Yongle Emperor, supervised the transfer of the imperial capital from Nanjing to a new city in Beijing, 550 miles to the northwest, adjacent to the old Yuan Dynasty capital of Dadu, which had been built by Kublai Khan beginning in 1264. The new Ming capital was surrounded by a wall 15 miles long and 40 feet high. In addition to an administrative hub with offices for government officials, the center of the complex contained the Imperial Palace, whose nearly 10,000 rooms could only be entered with the emperor's permission. Known in modern English as the Forbidden City, the Chinese term for it, Zijincheng, means Purple Forbidden City, a colorful reference not to the city's walls, but to the night sky, particularly the purplish constellation with the North Star at its center, which the emperor hoped to emulate, with his new capital as the earthly version of this navigational star. The Great Wall of China took on its familiar look during the Ming Dynasty. The oldest parts of the 4,500-mile-long Great Wall of China date back to the 7th century BC, when Chinese rulers first built border fortifications to keep northern armies at bay. Between 204 and 201 BC, an earthen Great Wall was built by hundreds of thousands of conscripted workers. Responding to new threats from the north in the late 1500s, the Ming emperors began an 80-year refurbishing of the wall, rebuilding it out of local granite, limestone, and fired bricks of clay strengthened with sticky rice. The taller, thicker, longer wall featured integrated watchtowers, barracks, and storehouses, and stretched from the Bohai Sea in the east to the Jiayu Pass, an important Silk Road oasis in the west. The dynasty's greatest admiral and navigator, Zheng He, sailed a vast armada as far as Africa. 50 years before Portuguese explorer Vasco da Gama sailed around the Cape of Good Hope and up the east coast of Africa, an armada of some of the largest wooden ships ever made was projecting Chinese power in the Seine waters, under the command of Ming Dynasty Admiral Zheng He. Born in 1371 into a Muslim family in Yunnan province, Zheng had been captured and castrated by Ming troops and sent into service to the imperial family, where he became a trusted advisor to the future Yongle Emperor. After his patron's ascension, he was put in charge of the Forbidden City's Corps of Eunuchs before being promoted to admiral. Between 1405 and 1433, Zheng's 7 maritime expeditions, which included up to 62 ships and 27,800 men, traveled trade routes through Southeast Asia, India, the Middle East, and Eastern Africa. Some 36 countries agreed to form tributary relationships with China, but after the death of the Yongle Emperor, the new regime put an end to the costly expeditions. Blue and white Ming Dynasty painted porcelain became one of the first global fads. In the Jiangxi province factory town of Jingdezhen, expert potters used local clay and imported Persian cobalt to create some of the Ming Dynasty's most popular trade items. Traditional patterns such as the dragon cloud motif in pottery were, in part, designed for export to the Arab world and eventually to Europe. When Vasco da Gama sailed for China in 1497, King Manuel I of Portugal instructed him to bring back two precious commodities, spices and porcelain. 2 years later, da Gama returned, having lost half his men, but holding a dozen pieces of chinaware. During the chaos following the Ming Dynasty's collapse, exports to Europe were interrupted, spurring the production of Delftware, a blue and white Chinese-style porcelain made in Holland. The final Ming emperor was toppled in a rebellion led by a former postal worker. By the early 17th century, the greatest threat to Ming supremacy lay northeast of the Great Wall in Manchuria. Military spending to meet the Manchu threat forced the Ming government to raise taxes while neglecting other parts of China. Among the many disgruntled workers who lost their jobs in the economic downturn was Lai Zicheng, a postal messenger in the western city of Xi'an. After a brief stint in the imperial army, Li joined groups of roving bandits, becoming a leader in a growing peasant rebellion. In 1644, Lai's men captured a barely defended Beijing. Abandoned by his closest advisors, the last Ming emperor, Chongjin, hung himself from a tree in the imperial garden. The Ming Empire population tripled. The peasants prospered, and the population grew quickly, from perhaps about 60 million at the beginning to a peak of about 180 million near the end. New food crops such as corn and potatoes, along with the canals, protection from invasion, and new infrastructure helped the peasants prosper. Europeans began trading operations in the early 1500s, and by the late 1500s, the merchants prospered greatly. The fortunes of the empire became heavily reliant on trade, and the government allowed free foreign trade. In the Western world and Japan, their manufactured products such as porcelain and silk were in high demand. The Ming Empire was founded by a poor peasant, Zhu Yuanzhang, 1328 to 1398, was a poor peasant who grew up during the final decades of the Yuan Dynasty era, 1279 to 1368, when severe natural disasters killed his own family and tens of millions of other people. The people believed these disasters meant that the Yuan Dynasty had lost the mandate of heaven, according to ancient political doctrine, and this encouraged them to attack the ruling Mongols. Big armies formed, and Zhu Yuanzhang led a powerful army south of the Yangtze River and captured the important city of Nanjing in 1358 that he made his capital city. Over the next 10 years, his army defeated the armies of rivals, and he finally captured the Yuan capital of Beijing in 1368 and declared himself the Ming Emperor Hongwu. As we reflect on the Ming Dynasty, it becomes evident that it was a time of great change, innovation, and achievement. However, it was also a period marked by numerous shocking events and occurrences. So that's it for today. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and click the bell button to get all the latest updates.